This is Lysha Holmes, and I'm your host of the Recruiters Recruitment Podcast. And I'm absolutely thrilled and so proud to be joined today by a guest that will be familiar to a lot of recruitment leaders across the UK. This is Neil Carberry, who is the Chief Executive of the Recruitment and Employment Confederation. Welcome to you today, Neil. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, Lysha. Well, it's great to be on the podcast, and I know the pod's created a bit of a buzz around the industry, so why not try and elbow in on the party, or at least elbow as far into the party as we can in these days.
Absolutely, that's what we have to do. I like that. It's a virtual party that we all want to be part of. Well, thank you so much. And for those who aren't familiar with the REC, for whatever reason, please can you give us an overview as to what your body actually does?
Yeah, so the REC is the UK's professional and trade body for recruiters. So we have about 3,300 recruitment companies as members and about 10,000 individual members who have done our professional qualifications. We're Ofqual regulated as an awarding body for recruitment qualifications. But I mean, really at the heart of what we do is transparency, standards, compliance and good practice for the industry. And at one end of that, we're talking to government all the time. It's been quite a busy year for talking to government, as you might imagine. In fact, just yesterday I was summoned to number 10. But there's also a lot of work to do in terms of talking to the world about what recruitment does, and particularly to clients about how to buy it well.
So it's creating a best practice, and I know that we were talking off camera about your sort of conversations with the government, so that's a huge part of what you do. But on behalf of all recruiters, thank you so much for creating that best practice. And we are going to make sure your links are attached to these broadcasts, that people can have some more information if they're not already an individual or a corporate member, of course, as well. So just to sort of put some context, we're recording this in lockdown 3 in January 2021. I can't believe we're saying lockdown 3. So since COVID began in January to March 2020, what has the impact been so far on the recruitment industry? Let's put some context around that.
So I think it's really important to start with where we were back in early March. And so I think it's fair to say 2019 was a consolidation year for the industry. Numbers didn't shoot the lights out. If you think back to then, we were worried about Brexit, weren't we? We were concerned about the economic cycle. We were thinking that there was a global economic slowdown happening then. And so what we saw through that year was sort of less high levels of growth than maybe we've seen previously. If you think back to January 2020 in the UK, there was then a little spurt of enthusiasm because we had some certainty about Brexit. And, whatever you think of Brexit, businesses can invest against certainty, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent certainty. So we just had that sense that things were picking up again. And I had a meeting of the World Employment Confederation board, which I sit on. That's the REC and the RECs from around the rest of the world. On the 12th and 13th of March. And when I came back, what was pretty clear, going through the message on my phone, is whiteboards were just emptying. And we know recruitment's first into a recession. So a recession that comes on in 48 to 72 hours, as the one that started 13th, 14th, 15th of March, will hit recruitment really hard. And that's what we saw, just whiteboards emptying and a real focus on business survival, looking after the cash flow, resilience through, and hours on the phone saying to people, look, hold your horses. We're working on something here with the other trade associations and with government, which of course turned out to be the furlough scheme, along with CBILS and all of the other things. And I think for the REC, that was a kind of a moment to test your mettle, where you've got to really go in hard to get things that the industry really needs. And I think together with other business organisations, we managed to do that. For the industry, why that was important was essentially cash is always what matters in crises. I'm fond of quoting Pa Carberry on this, who always used to say to me, it's like this: turnover is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is reality. And so that cash management focus, big bit of what every recruiter was doing. As we saw, probably temp recruitment dropped by about 40%, peak to trough. I think perm dropped a lot more than that and has been slower to recover. You can't quite see that in our latest survey because, of course, perm billing is spread over a longer time and takes longer to come through. But basically what we saw was a complete shutdown in March, where people were very focused on running their business, and then actually a surprisingly quick bounce back in temp, which started to improve, I think, by the end of April. And some of that is what we're experiencing right now in this third lockdown, which is once you learn how to trade in this environment, people get on with trading. You know, we can do people in recruitment, and that picked up. So I think temp picked up steadily through the year, has continued to do so. Perm much, much slower, definitely picking up in August and September. By what we call lockdown 2, which, you know, from the perspective where we are now, doesn't feel much like a lockdown, there was a kind of a flat period rather than a drop back. And now we're just now seeing what clearly will be a bit of a drop back in January and March this year. But I'm really confident that there's huge potential for a fast recovery in 2021. All the signals are there, and actually lots of the things that are happening in the economy are actually drivers to greater labour demand, not less labour demand through 2021. And we'll go on and talk a bit about that. But resilience in the industry, big cash flow impact, huge drop in demand in lockdown 1, much quicker recovery from temp than perm. But I think, just finish on this, I think a real maturity across the industry. I think as an industry we've stepped up, and people say, what's my abiding memory from 2020? I think the maturity and the quality of the work that's done across the industry is something we can all be so proud of, whether it's, you know, getting nurses into the right places to support the healthcare sector, or whether it's logistics and keeping the food chain flowing. You know, the people used to say, you know, everyone loves to kick a recruiter. I haven't seen much negative coverage of the recruitment industry in the last year, and that's down to the work that people are doing across the industry.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I think the perception of recruitment has definitely changed over the last 12 months, and rightly so, that we're seen more as, you know, we're collaborators, we've created communities. Whatever your sector is, there's a much better vibe of communication, isn't there, both internally as a sector and into ourselves, but also externally. So it's really nice that that's the feedback that you get. And so and I appreciate that, you know, you are in a very privileged position. You get to sort of witness how business leaders are doing things well. And I think, you know, one of the key things that came across from a lot of the podcasts I did last year was that, you know, that cash really is king, and that the businesses that had protected the cash are probably in a much better position to propel forward as we sort of look to the future. So you've definitely sort of corroborated on a lot of those things. So from what you observed and have observed so far, what would you say leaders can do to add value to their own internal businesses, but also to the industry as a whole? So what would you say has best practice looked like? What's good leadership look like to you?
Well, I think first and foremost, you know, we were just talking off camera about the difficulty of home learning. We both have slightly stroppy teenagers home learning at the moment in the rooms where we are.
Hang on.
Yeah, I think there's a real need for humanity. And, you know, as a business leader, leave aside the REC as the kind of trade association, the REC is a business with 60 staff that I lead. You know, inviting people across the business like this into my home to talk about what we're doing and understanding the challenges that they're facing in their day-to-day life, that humanity has been really important to preserving a sense of direction in businesses. Because truth be told, you know, we're sitting here recording this in January. It's 10 months since I've seen some of my staff face to face. It's been 10 months since we've had groups in rooms thinking about, you know, big things that we want to do and achieve. So maintaining that sense of direction, I think, has been really important for business leaders, and the humanity element there is super important, along with communication. Getting the cash management right, clearly very important. And then the third thing is kind of not to kind of get too lost in managerialism. Make sure you are leading with a longer term view. And I was very struck at our conference, REC 2020, back in September, when James Reed was talking about this. And he basically said, look, what better time than now to think about a bit of technology investment if you've got the cash. And technology doesn't have to be hugely expensive. What better time than now to think about how do I bring on my next generation of consultants to just position for the recovery. And I think if you've managed with resilience through this period and you're close to your clients, you've got to that space where clients are buying your services on value, not price, which is of course what we're all trying to do in the industry, then there could be a moment here to really take a leap. You know, when I made some changes at the REC before Christmas, I said to the staff members, what I'm trying to do here is mold us into the shape that I knew we would need for the next 2 or 3 years 6 months ago. But now we've got an opportunity to do it, and to do it with a greater sense of commitment. And that vision really matters, I think, to recruitment leaders at a time like this. Yeah,
no, definitely. And I think that, you know, when you said that at the start of the 3 points, you know, humanity, everything starts with that, doesn't it? And I think, you know, we as an industry have, people look over to see what we're doing. You know, we're the innovators and we're the educators to our end user clients ultimately. And I think that for me is obviously I'm a provider to the recruitment industry as a rep to rec, and I think that those that have really stood out for me are those that have, you know, accepted the challenges that we're facing as working parents. It's not easy. You know, we talked off camera about that. It's, you know, the priority is definitely getting the children back into school, but for the time being, what can we do to help you? What can we do to support you? And I think, you know, I do think it's about being brave, and I think, you know, having a strategy around it, and, you know, pivoting. You know, we've not talked about pivoting yet, but, you know, seeing where that opportunity is. And you know, for me, from what you've said, you know, those leaders who are clearly saying, look, you know, we are going to let's look at a structure now, so that when the recovery happens, we're well positioned to do that.
That thing about pivoting, I think, is really interesting. It's worth remembering that your clients are typically TA professionals or HR professionals. They are looking for the new map as well. And that's a huge pivot opportunity, because in the line, the chief exec, the FD, the operations managers of the companies, the client companies that recruiters are working with, the world is changing quickly and the market is changing quickly. And the people plan will have to change with it.
Yeah.
So you've got a lot of HRTA professionals who are looking for what that new people plan is. And, you know, what a great opportunity to get into that discussion with those long-standing clients where things are changing quickly, where you can really build and enhance the offer. I'm seeing lots of evidence of the firms who have invested in having a discussion with their clients that goes, what exactly is the problem you're trying to solve right now? That in those examples, that's where really interesting things are starting to happen.
And actually influencing and consulting, which ultimately is what we're here to do, isn't it? It's almost like it's stripped, the experience of the last 10 months has stripped back everything else that we're here to do. Technology hasn't actually proven to be our biggest threat. It's proven to be our biggest advantage, because it allows us to focus in on the human element of what we do, and to, you know, that adaptability is actually what will make you more successful as a recruitment leader. You know, adapting.
I couldn't agree more.
So someone sent me a great meme. I'll have to send it to you, actually. A great meme where it talked about, you know, you don't need to be the most intelligent person, but it's the one who wins is the most adaptable. It's a real quote, and I was like, I'm not going to be offended by the lack of intelligence part, but thanks for that. I knew what she was trying to say. So in terms of, you've talked about recovery, this recovery, when's it coming? When can we wait? When can we expect it, Neil?
So look, I was a bit of a pessimist at the beginning of all this, and I've gradually become more optimistic. You know, my background is thinking about the British jobs market for years and years and years at the CBI and the Low Pay Commission and so forth. You know, we're looking at a world where unemployment probably peaks in the 7% range, which is a bit lower than it was in 2008-09. We know now that there are already shortage areas of the economy emerging. We know that we have lower inflow, at least for the short run, until what the rules are around immigration post-Brexit beds in. And we know we've already had a demographic challenge, which is essentially that we're currently replacing a generation who were born in the 50s and increasingly early 60s with a generation who were born around the millennium. And the truth of the matter is there are just fewer of them. So there's a lean in the UK labour market at the moment towards long-term constraint and talent shortage. So I think a lot of the themes that we've talked about over the strategic long haul, in terms of, you know, how do you get your recruitment and retention strategy right? How do you plan to bring people into the organisation and to unlock their productivity? All that really high value professional services stuff that we know the industry wants to do a lot more of. I think that there's a wind at our back for that as soon as we get out of this period. And then the question is, well, how quickly do we get out of it? I'm a bit of an optimist there. Clearly, we're in a recession at the moment. We will be in a recession roughly from October, when Q4 started, to the end of March, when Q1 ends. But we bounce back very quickly. A couple of reasons why I think we bounce back quickly. One, this is a services economy and it's driven by the British consumer. While there is real hardship in parts of our communities right now, and we need public policy to address it, by and large, because we've managed to keep unemployment down, because people have lowered their spend over the last year, from about a third of the way up the income distribution to the top, households are sitting on, and this is a formal economic term here, sheds of cash.
Okay.
Right? And that cash will be sat on until such time as people are sure this is over.
Yep.
And when they're sure that it's over, some of that money will be saved and loads of that money will be spent. And that will be a major accelerant to the economy. And I think, you know, if you're an optimist about the vaccine program, as I think we should be,
yep,
I think that is in Q2 and Q3 of this year.
Yep.
So the way I see the kind of headline demand in the economy going is actually kind of down a bit over this quarter, then sharply up through Q2, Q3, Q4, with some upward pressure on inflation. So you expect to see starting salaries starting to rise, as we did actually in our December report on jobs, and the labour market following that. And we've already seen, you know, talked earlier about the bounce back we had seen in job ads in the second half of the year. We've already seen that starting to happen. And even the stuff that you think might be a drag on the economy overall, you know, clearly Brexit paperwork is a drag on the economy. There are upsides to that as well. A lot of what we're doing right now requires more labour input. It takes more labour input to order an Ocado delivery than it does to go to the co-op down the road. It takes more labour input to export now than it did before. Now, those may not be good things, or they may be good things. Yeah. Don't make a moral judgment. But I do think that sense of labour demand strengthening quite sharply in the British economy through the summer, if the vaccine programme delivers, is something that we should hold on to. And on that, I think we've actually reached a really good point now that's changed the debate, because throughout 2020 it was keep the economy open versus tackle the virus. Yeah. And now the number one priority in both of those is one thing: it's get the vaccine into people's arms.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I totally agree with you. Well, it's very encouraging, and I think, you know, from what you've said clearly, based on actual real data, we can all sort of get hopefully, whatever sector you're in, if you're in a skills shortage market, sort of brace yourself and make sure you're getting your talent pools ready. And what about IR35? You know, that seems to sort of be the unlucky cousin at the moment. It doesn't get talked about quite as much as the other two things. So where are we with IR35, and how do you think that's going to impact the recovery?
So I think IR35 is a fascinating one, because it's kicked back once and kicked back again immediately with the onset of COVID. And, you know, we are talking to the government now about whether April's really when you want to apply it. But of course, there's a slight challenge in that it can't be always winter but never Christmas, to borrow the Lion, the Witch in the Wardrobe thing, although I'm not sure IR35 is anything like Christmas. The challenge for government is that they're pretty set on it. I do think that there is a case for not going ahead in April, particularly because the regulation of umbrella companies, which we think is absolutely essential to this happening well, and gave evidence with a number of umbrella body representatives in Parliament just before Christmas on this. That regulation has to be in place to make sure that people who are compliant are properly protected from those who would bend the rules.
Yeah.
So, the REC line to government at the moment is, you should think about pushing back from April, particularly because you need to get this this regulation in place. Do I think it'll happen? My advice to all recruiters is assume that it will happen in April. It is the law. It is on the statute book. And I do think it will be, for a while, quite disruptive in some sectors.
Okay.
And I think we can all name the ones that we think are potentially open to challenge. IT is obviously one of them. I think, though, there are some areas of the market where we should welcome the changes that are coming. I personally don't think someone who is a van driver for one company most of the time is an independent contractor. I don't think they should be outside IR35. So there is some elements of the cleanup which we should hold our hands up and say, we're coming for a long time.
Yeah, you can't keep kicking the can down the road, can you? It was definitely long overdue, like you say. Well, and anybody that needs any more information, I know that your content is absolutely phenomenal, as you and obviously the REC as well, so they can get in touch with you. So
all of this stuff on my Whizzing You website, but also there's kind of IR35 training and webinars and all the stuff that people would need.
Definitely. No, and any I can see on the sign behind you, anyone that's watching us on YouTube, so definitely. Yeah.
This is first generation digital marketing, as opposed to second generation, which is actually digital. But it'd just be sitting around in the office not doing anything if I hadn't nicked it and brought it home.
You might as well. For those who are listening, Neil's pointing to a very wonderful poster sat behind him. But it's fine. I think I'm all for incorporating old school and new school. That's what I think this is all about. So for those who've listened thus far, have you got any final points of advice or recommendations to keep yourself as a leader and as a recruiter motivated and ready for whatever faces us going forward?
So a few things. Sarah Thewlis, the REC chair, joined our webinar just before Christmas, and I think she started with kind of that humanity point that we discussed earlier, Lysha. Not just about kind of humanity for your teams, but let's be clear, if you're a business leader, one of the overpowering emotions you have is actually loneliness. All the more so in the fact that we're all stuck in our offices at home, or our studies at home, or at the dining room table, and not seeing colleagues and not seeing our networks as much. So self-care matters. That humanity applies to us as leaders as well, because we make better decisions from our rested minds. So first and foremost, have a plan for your own resilience. Secondly, then, have a plan for your team's resilience. And I think you mentioned earlier, we have to kind of accept that people will work very differently at a time where they have responsibilities to children that they're educating at home. And we need to get out of this situation as quickly as we can, but in the meantime, work it through. And then thirdly, think about the long term. And for me, the long term is some of the stuff we've already discussed. Think about how we sell on value, not price. And what that means for client relationships, teams around the client. Think about the productive model of agencies. I've heard a lot of agencies talk about moving back towards 180 from 360, so that they can have teams that specialize in having multiple people caring for big clients, because they had that experience when a consultant went off on furlough. Yeah. That it was actually quite difficult to deal with a client that had been their client for 5-10 years, because the person who had the relationship was gone. And think about how you invest in tech. The challenge with rec tech is not that there isn't enough of it. The tech stack potentially is enormous, and vendors will tell you everything will make your business massively productive. Yeah. So do think about how you buy tech with confidence, using people who don't have an agency problem, i.e. they work for you. We're thinking a lot at the REC about how we can support with some of those big business decisions. We've just created a new team looking at business advice on stuff like this, because a kind of neutral arbiter on which technology will really make a difference to my business and do exactly what you said earlier. Lysha, about freeing consultants up to do the stuff that people do better.
Yeah.
I think that stuff is going to be really, really important.
Definitely. Oh, it's all really fantastic sound bites there. That's been really useful. And, you know, from one working parent to another, thank you for making time to join us today. It's been really useful. And, you know, hopefully when the lockdown's finished, we'll invite you back on and see where we're at. But thank you so much for joining me today, Neil. It's been a real delight.
Well, thank you, Lysha, and happy to join you anytime. And Happy New Year to all the listeners. It is going to be better in 2021. Not least because the mighty heart of Midlothian are going to get promoted.
Manifest it to the universe. There you go.